This may not be a uniquely American trait, but I must say you do it better than anyone. But there are limits to what even you can do, Captain. Or did Erskine tell you otherwise?
He told me you were insane.
He resented my genius and tried to deny me what was rightfully mine, but he gave you everything. So, what made you so special?
Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. I can do this all day.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I am one half of your host, Perry Constantine.
And I am the other half, Derrick Ferguson from beautiful downtown Brooklyn, New York.
Happy New Year, Derrick.
And a very happy new year to you, my friend. I am delighted, more than delighted, to see that you're with us here in 2020. And I wish a happy new year to all of our listeners out there. And I hope that, you know, your New Year's Eve was very special and everybody came through all right. And we're here ready to start a brand new year on Superhero Cinephiles.
Absolutely. And we got, speaking of, 10 episodes, buddy. This is our 10th episode.
This is our 10th episode. Wow.
We broke double digits.
It doesn't seem like it. You
I
know,
know.
It's amazing how short. Okay, it seems like really a short amount of time since we started this. And when you tell me that, or when I go over to the website and I actually look and I see how many episodes, I said, wow, you know, we've done quite a lot of work in a short amount of time, to be honest.
Yeah. And more coming, because we still got Crisis on Infinite Earths is wrapping up this week. And then we still got to do a in-depth discussion of the Watchmen TV show that just wrapped up as well.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention to you, next month, of course, February is Black History Month, and I wanted to discuss with you the possibility of us focusing on Black superhero movies for that month.
Yeah, I'd be totally fine with that. Sounds like a good idea.
Okay, and folks, if you guys got any suggestions out there for Black superhero movies you'd like for us to talk about, besides the obvious, because of course we're going to talk about Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, we're going to talk about that. And we'll probably get into Blade as well. But if you got any suggestions or recommendations for other superhero movies you want to see, Black superhero movies you want to see us talk about in February, then go to our Facebook group and leave your suggestions there.
Yeah, absolutely. But today we're talking about your pick, which is Captain America: The First Avenger.
Absolutely. My man, Captain America: The First Avenger. I picked this because, as I said, I wanted to start the new year talking about optimistic superhero. And I think that outside of Superman, you don't get a more optimistic superhero than Captain America.
No, I totally agree with that. And it's kind of, because we didn't plan this, obviously, but it is kind of fitting that Captain America is the first movie we're talking about after all this stuff going on between the U.S. and Iran.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And you know what? I was just talking about this with somebody else. I said, you know, so it's kind of funny how things like that kind of work out and hooks up when you don't plan it. But yeah, but once again, we are having a political situation where we're once again having to question the place America has in the world and on the world stage. Mm-hmm. And Captain America is a character who embodies that whole entire concept of America and what America is supposed to be and what it could be and what it is and can we make it better and how we can make it better and all of that stuff that goes in with it. Yeah.
And this is actually the fourth, no, or maybe fifth, I think, because there was a serial as well. So this is like the fifth Captain America movie that's been made.
Yeah. There were two made-for-TV movies back in the 70s.
Right, starring Red Brown.
Red Brown, yeah, who actually played the son of Steve Rogers.
And he had a cameo in First Avenger when during the awards ceremony when you see Stan Lee's cameo and he says to the guy next to him, "I thought he'd be taller." That guy sitting next to him is Red Brown.
Oh, that really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. And see, I watched that movie today, and of course I saw the Stan Lee cameo because how can you miss a Stan Lee cameo? But I had no idea of it. But that's nice. I always like when they can bring back people who were involved in these movies, and even if they give them like a small cameo, like not to derail the conversation, but I love how they gave the guy, what's his name, John Wesley Shipp, who played the original Flash back in. I love how they gave him a major role in the new Flash.
Two major roles, in fact, because first he was Henry Allen, and then later he came back as Jay Garrick.
Yeah, as Jay Garrick. So,
and then he even got to reprise his role as the original Barry Allen.
Yeah. In the Crisis, which we'll get into, later on. But yeah, he got to come back as the original Barry Allen. How often does that happen? See, I'm telling you, folks, we live in an age of coolness when it comes to these superhero movies and TV shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the other one, so there was the Red Brown ones, and there was the Matt Salinger one in 1990.
That's the one we don't talk about.
Well, it's interesting because some of the elements of it actually make it into this movie, because you have the whole idea of the Red Skull being the first recipient of the super soldier serum. That comes from that Matt Salinger movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Which really, I thought, is one of the many touches of this movie, because I know a lot of people, they complained about various things when they changed the origin and stuff like that. But I thought that some of the changes that they made in this, and I don't even call them changes, I call them tweaks. Mm-hmm. Because I feel pretty sure that if Captain America was created today, and in a way, that's what they did. They were creating a Captain America for today in the form of this movie, that there were things about the origin. They said, okay, well, let's, tighten this up a little bit and let's give this a fresh coat of paint, and, which all work together as a whole. And making the Red Skull the first recipient of the super soldier serum, that's good. That's an excellent idea.
Yeah. And they take elements from a bunch of different Cap types of origin. So they've got some aspects of the Ultimate stuff in here too. What with Cap and Bucky being the same age and being childhood friends. And instead of Bucky being a costume sidekick, he's one of the soldiers who works with Cap instead.
Yeah, the Howling Commandos.
Yeah, which I think was a brilliant change. I thought it works really well. It makes the whole Bucky situation much more realistic, and it sets him up much more believably for the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, I mean, it adds a whole new dimension to their relationship by making them, roughly the same age. Because now it's more like a brother type of relationship, whereas in the original relationship between Captain America and Bucky, when he's a kid, of course, is, there's a whole other dynamic there. But in this one, the dynamic between the two characters is a lot better, and I appreciated it a lot more. And who was it? The guy that played Bucky, what's his name? Sebastian Stan?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. He's great. But everybody is great in this movie. I mean, a lot of people have said that this is their favorite MCU movie, and I can understand why. Because of the excellent casting choices and the way that the story is told. I got to calm down. My excitement for this movie is getting to me. No, really, because you know what? This is like 5 different movies in one, and they all work together.
Yeah.
It's got to work as a part of the MCU, because while chronologically this is actually the first movie, because when I rewatch the MCU movies, I always watch this one first. but it was like the fifth one that was made.
Yeah, it came. So there was Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and Thor, and then this one.
Right. But chronologically, this one, of course, since it takes place during World War II. But yeah, it's got to work as a part of the MCU as a whole. It's a legitimate World War II war movie. Mm-hmm. It's a superhero origin movie. It's science fiction, and it's a pulp action adventure. You know, there's a lot of elements of the 1930s and 40s serials in here.
And a lot of that is down to their choice of director for this, because they picked Joe Johnston, who directed The Rocketeer, which was, you know, about as pulp as you can get.
Oh, I mean, Joe Johnston, he directed that The Rocketeer. He also directed the 1995 Jumanji, Jurassic Park 3, which a lot of people don't like for one reason. For whatever reason, I don't understand. But
I'm one of those people.
Tell me they just can't stand it.
The raptor dream sequence alone just drives me nuts every time I see it.
Oh, okay. I mean, you know, it's not a perfect movie. Know what it is? It's not so. To me, it's not so much that it's a bad movie, that it's an unnecessary one.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody really needed a Jurassic Park 3. Mm-hmm. You know, but at least they got Joe Johnston, who did it, who is a director that knows how to tell a story, visually, pays attention to characterization, which is one of the best things about Captain America: The First Avenger, in that there is nothing lost in characterization in all of the action. He knows how to slow things down for a bit, let us get to know the characters, and then he knows how to ramp back up the action seemingly effortlessly. You know, it's like he has no problem doing that. Whereas some directors, once they get into a situation where they slow down the plot, they slow down the action, then it takes them a while to get back up to speed. Not this guy.
No, he does a really good job of keeping that balance.
Yeah, he keeps an excellent balance, and like I said, he knows how to tell the story visually. There is absolutely no point in Captain America where you don't know what's going on. You don't know why people are doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. You're never lost in this movie. You know exactly what's going on at all the time, which I think is very important for this type of story, because there's a lot that goes on in here.
And what a lot of people don't realize about this movie is it spans like probably the longest amount of time of maybe aside from Endgame, but this movie spans the longest amount of time of any of the MCU movies, because it starts in 1942 and it ends in 1945. Like, the main story happens over the course of those 3 years, which a lot of people don't realize. And I remember when it came out, Johnston actually said that, you know, we did that intentionally because we just wanted to present this story of Cap versus the Red Skull, but we also wanted to leave open the possibility because Cap was active throughout all of World War II. So you really could go back and do more movies set in this era with Captain America, or with, you know, the Invaders, who are teased at with the scene at the World's Fair when you see the Human Torch's body.
Right, exactly. As a matter of fact, I've always said that they actually could, because there's like a whole sequence there where we see is clips of Captain America and the Howling Commandos. They're raiding the Hydra bases, and you know, and there's all these hints that there are all these missions that they went on. So there actually should have been another movie after this called Captain America and the Howling Commandos that should have just been about their wartime adventures. Mm-hmm. Because there's plenty of, because as you said, there's plenty of room for it, you know.
And many of those actors are still willing to work for the MCU. I mean, obviously Sebastian Stan's there, but you got Neil McDonough, who reprised the role of Dum Dum Dugan several times.
Oh my God! When I first saw him on screen as Dum Dum, so help me, and I'm not lying here, folks. I wept because. Really, rarely do you see a character from the comic books embodied so well. You say, "Oh my God!" I said, "That's Dum Dum." Yeah, I didn't realize who the actor was at first, but I knew it was Dum Dum.
Yeah, he was perfect. And you also had Jim Morita, who reprised now plays his own grandson in the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
Which was also a nice little nod they threw in.
It was a really good choice for them to have a multicultural group of Howling Commandos. Now, rather because of course in the original when they did, they were all white guys with just one black guy. But now there's Jim Morita, which I assume, given the nature of the attitude toward Japanese Americans at the time, that's what he's playing, a Japanese American.
And they reference that just in a very subtle way when Dum Dum says, "What, are we taking everybody now?" And then he pulls out his dog tag. He's like, "Hey, I'm from Fresno."
Right, exactly. They do that, and I don't know if what's his name. I'm trying to think of the black guy's name. Hold on, let me pull it up.
I think it's Derrick Luke or something like that.
Derrick Luke. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He is playing Gabe Jones.
Yeah.
He is playing Gabe Jones, and yeah, and there's one guy. I think
he's the polyglot among the group because he can speak English, he can speak German and French.
Right, because when they climb into the tank, when they're making the big break from the Hydra base, and Dum Dum is sitting there and he can't read the instructions that's on the control board. And Gabe Jones is telling them, what it is. He's like, "Oh, wow, you speak German too?" He's like, "Yeah, well, of course I can." He said 4 years at, some university that he went to. And he speaks something like 6 languages.
Yeah.
So,
And he says, he's like,
Yeah.
he spoke German and then I switched to French because the girls were cuter.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of these people. Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter, who is absolutely brilliant in this movie.
Right. So in the comics, especially, she did become kind of a presence in the comics. She ended up working with Cap as an older woman and being part of his support crew in the Avengers. But she never really had much of a major role outside of that in the comics. She wasn't involved in the creation of S.H.I.E.L.D. or anything like that. And especially relative to Sharon Carter, who was originally her sister, and then later it was retconned that she was her niece, becomes Cap's love interest in the comics and is a huge part of his adventures even now. It's the opposite in these movies because there was such a huge, there was so much appreciation for how Atwell played the character that she became such an integral part to these movies.
Yeah. I mean, and then of course she had, I think it went for 2 seasons. She had the Agent Carter,
TV show
series, which even more delved into the origins of how S.H.I.E.L.D. got started and how she was involved with Howard Stark and it was her and Dum Dum and a few others of the Howling Commandos were, really the guys that founded S.H.I.E.L.D. and they started it along with Howard Stark, and to me, it is one of the major crimes that ABC canceled Agent Carter and stuck Haley Atwell in this pitiful little show that they were trying to do. It was like a knockoff of a Shonda Rhimes show. They were trying to do a Shonda Rhimes show without Shonda Rhimes. And it was a terrible show that nobody watched because, of course, everybody who knew Haley Atwell wanted to see her as Agent Carter. And if she wasn't playing Agent Carter, then they didn't want to see her. And anybody who hadn't seen her in anything else, well, they said, well, we don't know who this British chick is, so we don't want to see her. It was a dumb move on their part, period. Because really, Agent Carter could still be running today based on the ratings and the popularity. There was nothing wrong with the ratings. They just wanted to stick her in another show.
Yeah, that makes no sense. I mean, you've got a good thing. Why are you going to mess with it?
I mean, please. Like I said, Agent Carter, based on the ratings and as popular as that show was, it would still be on the air today because it was alternating for a while with when it was on with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, and they had they introduced some concepts from the comics in there too. So they had the Red Room program, so the which created Black Widow. They had the early version of that in there. They also introduced Dr. Faustus through that.
Yeah. I mean, Agent Carter, I'm glad that I signed up for Disney Plus. I can go back and watch it again. But at the same time, it makes me mad because when I think of all the potential of that show that was squandered, it just makes me mad. It was a decision that, I have no idea why they made that. And then they go off and they make something like The Inhumans, which nobody was asking for, which nobody wanted, and which went nowhere. And
there was someone. The only person who wanted that show was Ike Perlmutter because he wanted to make the X-Men without the X-Men, and it didn't work at all.
And to this day, I've still never seen The Inhumans.
It's not really. You're not missing anything.
Well, yeah, that's why I didn't watch it. Everybody said, "Don't worry about it. You're not missing a thing." Yeah. I looked at the advanced things that they had, and I said, the advanced photos and stuff like that. I said, nah, I don't want to be bothered with this.
I gave it a shot, and the weird thing is, it had the same showrunner as the first season of Iron Fist, and I'm like, why do they keep hiring this guy?
Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea. Iron Fist is also another one of those shows. Right from the start, I said, well, you know what? If you're gonna do a show and your lead character is a master martial artist, then that's who you hire to play the character. And you teach him how to act rather than getting an actor and then teaching him martial arts.
Or if you have to do the actor route, at least have him use the mask then, so then you can just put in a body double.
Thank you. Which is because I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and they were talking about how they had to, get the right actor to, do the martial arts if they have a Moon Knight series. I said Moon Knight wears a full face mask.
No, Moon Knight, you're fine.
Anybody, the actor, you put any kind of stuntman or martial artist in there. It don't matter. What are you talking about?
Well, look at Daredevil. You telling me that was Charlie Cox doing all those highway fight scenes? I don't think so.
No, absolutely not. No, of course not. But that's one of the reasons why you do these type of movies, in that you can put a mask on the stuntman and nobody will ever know. Yeah. Which brings me to another point that I wanted to make, that in past episodes, you and I have complained about how, like in fight scenes or something like that, there's always some contrived method that they use to remove the hero's mask. Mm-hmm. Well, in Captain America, you don't have that problem because Captain America is not exactly your typical superhero per se. So he doesn't have to wear a mask through the whole movie, which he really, for most of this movie, we see Chris Evans' face,
Well,
good reason.
Something else they did here is they took a line from the more recent comics and from the Ultimates, where Cap does, which they did the same thing with Iron Man, which they got rid of the whole idea of the secret identity. And I think it actually works for both those characters because, Tony Stark's already a celebrity in his own right, so it doesn't matter. And with his ego, it would make sense that he'd want the world to know he's Iron Man. And with Captain America, I've read some of the comics. You're probably more familiar with them than I am, but I've always felt the stuff that dealt with his secret identity was always kind of weak and always felt like it was a bit tacked on.
Yeah. Every once in a while, Marvel would do this thing where Steve Rogers would have like a crisis of conscience, and he wanted to have a normal life, and he would go off and try to have a normal life, which never really worked out because it's not like, okay, you have Batman and Bruce Wayne who are like two different personalities. Okay, it's not like that with a lot of the Marvel like a lot of DC heroes. They're almost like split personalities in that their superhero persona is different from, their everyday. But with the Marvel superheroes, it's not like that. It's not like, okay, there's Tony Stark and Iron Man. When he says at the end of Iron Man, I am Iron Man. Well, yeah, he is. Yeah. That's who he is. He doesn't see Iron Man as being a separate identity. It's who he is. It's the same thing with Captain America. Captain America is not a separate identity from Steve Rogers. that's who. Okay, that's who he wanted to be. The super soldier formula made him more of what he already was inside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's not so really, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the whole secret identity thing, we've moved past that because most of the time you have these superheroes. They're superheroes all the time. Mm-hmm. It's not like, you know, okay, well, unless you're somebody like Peter Parker.
Right. Well, it does make sense for some characters. You know, it makes sense for Peter Parker because he's a high school kid. He's got his aunt and everything. He's got his own personal life. So it makes sense for him to have a secret identity, or any kind of character who, you know, isn't rich like Tony Stark, or doesn't live off a government salary like Steve Rogers. You know, it makes sense for like the street heroes like Daredevil to have a secret identity.
Right, exactly. But I mean, you know, Steve Rogers, okay, like back in the 60s and 70s, he was either doing one of two things. He was either working with the Avengers, or when he wasn't working with the Avengers, he was working with S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah.
He was, I mean, I don't know. I would have to do some research about this. I don't know if he ever was an actual agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but half the time, you know, he was popping up in Nick Fury, you know, and he was going on missions for Nick Fury. And, well, where's Captain America? How come we don't have him? Well, he's doing something for S.H.I.E.L.D. Oh, well, and then S.H.I.E.L.D. would need, well, no, he's working with the Avengers. So there was really no reason for Steve Rogers to have a secret identity where, you know, it was like, yeah, but this movie, it does away with all of that. And yes, we all benefit greatly.
Well, that's actually brings me something I want to talk about is the comics. So how invested were you in the Cap comics in the past, or up until now?
I was invested in them during the era. Well, of course, I got involved in it when Jack Kirby was doing it. But then back then, listen, if Jack Kirby was drawing it, I was reading it. Then I went through the whole period where he got the Falcon as a sidekick / partner. So, of course, when Jim Steranko was doing it, he briefly, you know, he did a couple of issues of Captain America.
Oh, I didn't know he did a few Cap issues.
Yeah, Jim Steranko did a couple of Cap issues. That was one of those times when because in one of them, Steve Rogers actually fakes his death. Mm-hmm. So that, you know, because he doesn't want to be Captain America anymore, which, like I said, every couple of years they would do that thing, like, you know, like Spider-Man no more. Well, they would do Captain America no more. Like when he became the Nomad and somebody else took over the Captain America identity. Every once in a while they would give the identity of Captain America over to somebody else, because one of the more interesting things about it was that they would tell Steve Rogers, well, listen, you don't own the costume or the shield. That belongs to the United States government. If you don't want to be Captain America, we're going to give it to somebody else and let them be Captain America.
Yeah, because I remember if I'm remembering the history correct, I haven't read these issues, so most of what I know is just from like secondhand sources. But from what I remember, he gave up the Cap identity. It was his choice to give the Cap identity after the Secret Empire story, and then he became Nomad. And then in the 80s, the Commission on Superhuman Activities, they took the identity away from him because he wouldn't do what they told him to do.
Right, exactly. Because they told him, they said, well, as Captain America, you're an agent of the United States government. So you got to do what we tell you to do. He said, no, bump that. I'm not doing that. I do. Well, of course, because you know what? He's had 50, 60 years of doing what he want to do. Yeah. You know, he's not going to turn over and do what they want. So it's okay, well, we got to take the costume and we got to take the shield. Right. Because it belongs to us.
Yeah, and so then they gave it to John Walker, who later became U.S. agent, and Steve took on the Captain identity, wearing the costume that John Walker would later wear.
Mm-hmm. And of course, eventually, he always goes back to being, you know, Captain America. But you know, But again, it is good to explore these type of aspects in the character, because every once in a while, Steve Rogers has to redefine who he's supposed to be as Captain America and what he's supposed to represent. Mm-hmm. And much like Superman, which is why I compare the characters all the time. And let me just say this really briefly, in that and you and I have discussed this privately and on, this podcast about how one thing that I really don't like about comic book fans nowadays is that whenever you talk about characters like Captain America and Superman, I can't stand them. They're Boy Scouts. They're unrealistic. No, they're too goody-goody. Well, there is nothing goody-goody or unrealistic about superheroes or heroes, period, or just plain human beings who do the right thing because it is the right thing to do.
I never got this attitude of all superheroes must be like a certain way. I mean, I like violent anti-heroes like Wolverine and the Punisher. I love those characters as well, but I also love like the goody two-shoes characters too. You've got room for both. You don't have to have one or the other.
Right, exactly. And listen, Wolverine and the Punisher, I'm not crazy about them as characters, but they do have their place because any good character, period, has their own worldview and their own way of looking at things and their own way of doing things. And if we didn't have these different types of characters to clash together, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to put Captain America up against somebody like the Punisher or Wolverine and let them bump heads. And, their ideologies are supposed to be at war.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, because Captain America, and that's another thing that people have said. Yeah, well, Captain America, I don't understand why he doesn't keep on killing people. He killed people during World War II. Captain America, yes, he killed people, but he's not a killer.
Right.
There's a difference. Wolverine is a killer.
Yeah.
But Captain America is not a killer. Yes, he has killed people in the past, and if he deems it necessary in the protection of other lives, he will kill again. But it's not like he goes out. It's not like it's his first choice. Like Wolverine is just, okay, so he pops the claws. Whap, that's it.
No. Cap uses lethal force as a last resort. And he's one of the things that... I don't want to get too much into Superman territory, but one of the things people complain about with Superman is his code against killing. But it makes sense for Superman because he has all that power and he has to put those restraints on himself. Cap doesn't have all that power, so it does make sense for him to have those situations when he would have to resort to lethal force.
Right, and you can't get around the core of what the character is because he is a soldier.
Right.
He is a soldier, so he has been trained to use lethal force, but he's also been trained in knowing when to use that lethal force, and he doesn't just use it indiscriminately. As you point out so accurately, he only does it when he has no other recourse, to do it. So, but it really gets on my nerve when people talk about, and mind you, a lot of people. Okay, if that's the case, that Captain America is too goody-goody or he's too much of a Boy Scout, then why was this movie so wildly successful?
It's funny because I remember in the lead up to this movie, everybody was saying that, Cap's an anachronism. It's going to fail. It's not going to, he doesn't work in the modern day. And also the fact that it was Captain America. The reason they had this was the first Marvel movie that had a subtitle. They had the First Avenger subtitle, is because at the time they were worried because of this was during we're still in the aftermath of Iraq and everything. People were worried that if we put out a movie called Captain America overseas, people aren't going to see it. So people are going to go in with the misconception that it's going to be, jingoistic or something like that. So they released it overseas just under the title The First Avenger.
Yeah, which makes sense. But something, when you watch the movie, you realize that the story is really not so much about it doesn't have that jingoism that you were talking about. Mm-hmm. It's much more a character study about this one guy who, as he says, when he goes to the professor and the professor is asking him questions about that, why do you want to go overseas and kill Nazis and everything like that? He says, well, no, I don't want to kill Nazis. He says, I want to go over there. He said, because I don't like bullies.
This is, I think, Chris Evans, I think, is the perfect distillation of who Captain America is. And there was there's an essay I read a few years back which talked about like what kind of person Captain America is, because people who aren't familiar with the comics, they go in thinking, well, you know, Cap's this soldier from World War II, so obviously he's gonna be like a certain type of character, right? He's gonna be like kind of like this macho alpha male jingoist type of character, is how a lot of people who don't know the character, that's their image of what Captain America should be, just based on that. But you know, Steve was a guy from Brooklyn. He was an artist. He went to art school. He grew up in like the artistic world of New York City. He wasn't, you know, like some guy, some roughneck or something like that.
Well, no, he had asthma. He was a scrawny guy. He was your typical 98-pound weakling.
Yeah. So it always drives me nuts when people think that that's what Captain America should be, or you know, even more maddening when they portray him after he's woken up in the modern day, and they always portray him like he's an old man in a young man's body, when really he still is a young man, right? His being frozen in ice for 70 years didn't age his mentality. He still has the mentality of a guy in his 20s.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the comic books did. Okay, they had that tendency to portray him as like he would say, "Oh, I'm 80 years old and I'm a," but no, he's not. You know, okay, he was frozen in ice for 80 years,
right?
But he's not 80 years old. Actually, he's just like, you know, he was frozen when he was still in his 20s.
And not to get too much into Winter Soldier, but I did like how they handled that, where he's not this guy who's confused by everything, but he's this guy, you know, he's a young guy, so he's exposed to this world with all this technology, all this history. So what's the first thing he does? He starts making a list and he starts learning how to do things.
Yeah, he starts catching up.
Yeah.
You know, he says, "Oh, wow." He said, you know, okay, here's a guy who is literally living in the science fiction world that he saw in the first movie, when him and Bucky, when they go to the pavilion, right, and it's the World's Fair and everything like that. Okay, by the end of the movie, he wakes up, he's in that world. So yeah, he's saying, "Wow, this is cool."
Yeah, and he talks about it, when he's talking to Falcon, he's like, you know, food's much better. He's like, you know, we used to boil everything. You know, there's no polio now. The internet's so helpful.
Yeah, but going back to what you said about the whole thing with they were worried how this movie would be perceived overseas, but the script is clever enough that it sidesteps that whole issue by giving us a reason for the Captain America the whole thing, in that it was a propaganda tool to sell war bonds. You know, it wasn't a political thing. It was, they told Steve Rogers, "Okay, well, listen, we're going to put you in the suit and you're going to go around the country and tour and you're going to inspire people again." So that's how Captain America starts out, as a propaganda. And I remember it isn't until later on.
Yeah, and I remember when that information came out that Captain America was going to be going on USO tours in the movie, you know, people were like, "Why are they doing that? That doesn't make any sense." And now you watch the movie and you're like, "Oh, wait, no, it makes perfect sense."
It makes perfect sense. And then we see that he makes, Captain America movies, and you see the comic book, see the comic book that has the famous drawing of Captain America punching, So, yeah, when you present Captain America in that light, that he starts out strictly as a propaganda tool and something that's used to entertain troops and stuff like that, and then he transitions into being, this frontline soldier that inspires other soldiers, then you say, okay, Captain America now is not just a political idol or symbol. He's inspirational symbol to the troops and, the people back home and everything. And I think that it was a clever move on the part of the scriptwriters to go that route and give us that rationale for why Captain America is the way he is and how he came about. And also, they managed to get in the original costume with the funny looking wings on the head as well in that one.
And so the original shield, too. And the original shield, because he has that on the tour, and that's what's great about that transition, is he's there because he's there to entertain the troops. And then when he finds out that Bucky and the rest of the 107th are still captured, all he has is that suit, right? So he doesn't have he doesn't have a uniform or anything, and the only weapon he can get is he gets a gun. But other than that, he still needs. So he takes the shield with him, and so it all works really well. And then he comes back, and everyone now knows him as Captain America. So now they're like, no, we want to keep that symbol. That's a great. They realize, this is a great symbol we can use. They kind of stumble upon it by accident, and then they find a way to incorporate it into his regular uniform.
Because it's a great scene when he first gets there and he's at the army camp and he's trying to do his show and everything like that. And the soldiers are making fun of him, of course, because they say, we're out here getting our asses shot off and you're back home, you're having fun with the dancer girls and everything like that. And they call him Captain America, but they call him that as an insult.
Right.
They deride him. But after he rescues all the soldiers and bring them back, then they start calling Captain. They say, "Let's hear it for Captain America." They mean it for real. Now it's that's an actual title now that they bestow upon him. They say, "Yeah, man, you are Captain America." It's a great scene.
Well, also when he frees the prisoners, and they're like, "Who are you?" and he's like, "I'm Captain America," and they're like, "What?" In fact, the one who says it is John Falsworth, who's the original Union Jack, who's one of the Howling Commandos. When he's just like, he's like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah. But it's a great, and like you said, when he goes to Stark and he says, "Okay, well, I got some ideas, for the suit," and then he incorporates because when he goes out to rescue the soldiers, he gets the helmet that's got the A on it, and he has a leather jacket, and he gives it to Stark, who incorporates all of that into the new outfit that he makes for himself, which is a lot more realistic look. It looks like something that you would actually wear into combat.
Well, yeah, that's the genius of this, and this is kind of a credit to Brian Hitch when he was doing the Ultimates, because the first issue of the Ultimates was Cap in World War II, and so instead of putting him in a regular superhero costume, they put him in a military uniform that was colored red, white, and blue, basically, and they used that as the inspiration for Cap's look in this movie, and it's done perfectly well. It makes sense. It's utilitarian.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that Captain America costume, you say, well, why would somebody wear that bright red, white, and blue that's on a battlefield? And it's still red, white, and blue, but the colors are sufficiently muted that he doesn't stand out really. I mean, the brightest thing about him is the shield that he carries. Mm-hmm. Actually, that's the brightest thing he has. And again, I guess that works just like the bat symbol on Batman's chest, is that's what the enemy shoots at. Right. They shoot at the shield. They don't shoot at him. Yeah.
But one of the great things that the MCU has done is they find practical reasons for these costumes to make sense. They tailor them towards the individual character. They don't go in with one sweeping generalization like they did with the X-Men movies, where it's, they all have to have one look. No, they look at each individual character and they're like, well, Iron Man's high-tech suit of armor, so we can go get away with using that just like it is in the newer comics. Captain America's a soldier, so we're going to take his uniform and we're going to make it a soldier's uniform just with the regular colors. Black Widow and Hawkeye are spies, so we're going to give them suits that reflect that and are suited to their specific strengths and skills.
Okay. One of the major things I like about all the MCU movies is that they're not just superhero movies. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, okay, we got this movie. Like I said earlier, it's a World War II movie as well as being a superhero movie. Then you have Thor, which is not just superhero movie, but it's like a Ray Harryhausen type of fantasy movie. Mm-hmm. You have Iron Man, which are these high-tech thrillers. And it's like every movie is tailored. Like you said, there's nothing cookie-cutter about the MCU. They're all movies that are tailored to the strength of the individual characters, which gives them their own unique look and tone and style or whatever.
Absolutely.
They're not just saying, then they're saying, okay, well, we're just not going to follow this formula, for every movie. They don't. It's tailored for every separate different character.
Mm-hmm. And that because one of the things we've talked about before is that Hollywood, when it comes to superhero movies, Hollywood loves the origin story, because the origin story, it's very simple, it's very easy for Hollywood executives to understand. It fits the basic hero's journey structure. The problem is when you get into sequels, and then Hollywood's like, well, what do we do now? We've already done the origin story. But but Marvel has figured out, and they're like, well, what you do is you don't think of them as superhero movies, you think of them as genre movies that have superheroes in them.
Bingo. Exactly. Exactly.
And that allows you to then go beyond the origin story movie. So you had the first Captain America. It was set in World War II. So it's a pulp war adventure.
Exactly.
But then
that's what it is.
But then you bring it into the modern day, and suddenly, well, you can't do the World War II pulp adventure anymore. That's going to seem very anachronistic. So what do you do now? What do you do in the 21st century? You make it a political thriller, and it works so well.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, the Winter Soldier. We're going to get into that one of these days. That is like, as much as I love Thor and the Black Panther and all those other movies, I would have to say that if you're going to point at something that is like the crown jewel, it would have to be the Winter Soldier.
Yeah. Definitely, yeah.
I mean like you said, that's that took superhero movies to a different type of level in that year. You could do a political John Frankenheimer type of paranoid political thriller in there and still have plenty of superheroic stuff all going on, at the same time.
As well as bringing up, pretty heady questions about like what's the role of government surveillance, all this kind of stuff is worked into that movie.
I mean, stuff that you would never expect to find in a superhero movie. But again, that serves the whole idea of Captain America trying to figure out who Captain America is supposed to be in this world he's found himself in. When he was in World War II, he knew who he was supposed to be as Captain America. Now, because if you remember when the Winter Soldier starts, he's on this covert mission, for S.H.I.E.L.D., and he's having a conversation with the Black Widow, who all throughout the movie, that's one of the best things about it, that they're talking about, okay, well, this is our government, but should our government be doing this? Should we be helping our government doing this? They get into some pretty deep discussions that, would, like I said, would be more suited for a John Frankenheimer paranoid thriller than a superhero movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that, it's kind of funny when you think about it, because when the MCU was beginning to start, everyone assumed that the Iron Man movies would be the backbone of the whole universe. And in some ways, Robert Downey Jr. is kind of a linchpin. But more than that, the Cap movies really became the backbone of it. So much stuff in the MCU as a whole derived from events that happened in the Captain America movies. In the Iron Man movies, after you get done with the first Iron Man movie, the stuff that happens in Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, that doesn't really have any noticeable impact on the rest of the universe.
Yeah, it's all personal stuff that really affects Tony Stark.
Right.
Really. More than anything else, especially Iron Man 3. It's really all about him. It's not, like you said, it's not really events. Whereas in the Winter Soldier, well, I mean, that thing just turns the whole Marvel universe, the whole MCU. I mean, forget about it. It just throws a lot of shit that we knew out the window.
Yeah, and Iron Man 3, pretty much everything that didn't directly involve Tony has ended up getting changed back to the way something else. Rhodey became Iron Patriot, and then immediately the next time we see him, he's back to War Machine. The Mandarin is revealed to be fake, and now we're getting him as Shang-Chi's father in the upcoming Shang-Chi movie.
And know something? Okay. Just let me throw this out there real quick. I know that Van Allen Plexico, whose birthday it is today, as we're recording this, happy birthday, Van. He's going to get on me. But I never understood why people got so hostile about because what? I always figured that the Mandarin that was presented in that movie, that wasn't the real Mandarin.
Well, they didn't. At the time, we didn't know that. It was intended to be that it was always, the Mandarin was never a real person. That was Shane Black's intention. And then after that, they retconned it in the one shot, All Hail the King, when they revealed that there's a real Mandarin.
Yeah, I saw, but I always took it as a given. I said, yeah, well, this can't be the Mandarin. So I just, like, in my own head, I just went with the premise that, yeah, well, this guy isn't the real Mandarin. This is, like a prop, somebody that they, got out there in front to be this buffoon so that nobody would take the real Mandarin seriously. He's somewhere in his lair in China, plotting overthrow of the Western world or whatever, but... Okay, well, we'll get into that when we get to Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
This is real later.
Now, back to this movie. Like, my whole thing with the Cap comics, I didn't really start reading Captain America regularly until the Brubaker stuff, when he brought back Bucky as the Winter Soldier. I'm not sure. Have you read any of the Brubaker stuff?
I have not read it. Matter of fact, I have not read much Marvel since the turn of the century.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I picked up the occasional issue here and there, but and I read Civil War. Of course.
Well, that was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, what can I tell you? But I haven't read DC or Marvel on a regular basis since I would say like the late 90s. Well, you know what? Once comics got to be too expensive and they got to be where I could read them in the time it would take for me to leave the comic book shop and walk to my car. Once they got like that, I said, nah, this is a habit that's, too expensive.
I do recommend checking out the Brubaker stuff, though. It's really like the gold standard of Captain America, I think. And it's, basically the movies, not so much First Avenger, but definitely Winter Soldier and to a lesser extent Civil War. Like the way they portray Cap and the types of stories they tell with Cap, that all comes straight from Brubaker's stuff. And it's really, really smart, like political thriller type stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, see now, especially now that digital comics are so cheap now, what I'm doing is going back, and I am reading a lot of stuff that I missed out on because, I can get it for digital, and, they're always having these great sales on all these graphic novels, and so I could just go and, like, buy, like, an entire run. Yeah. And it only cost me like a couple of bucks,
right.
So that's what I've been doing. I've been going back, and actually I've been rediscovering a lot of great stuff and a lot of new stuff that I wasn't reading all this time, simply because, now the digital world is, and like we mentioned before, who are those people? They're always having these great sales, and it's like, oh my God, they're breaking my bank account.
Yeah, Comixology.
Comixology. Yeah, they're always having sales, but I can't help it because you know what? It's so cheap that I feel bad for not buying it.
So
that's how good some of the sales are.
Yeah, the Brubaker stuff is amazing. You definitely want to check out Brubaker's Cap. But also they now Ta-Nehisi Coates is doing it, and he's got the first two. I think it was just the second trade. It's up to 2 trades right now, and that's also really good. It's Ta-Nehisi Coates, so he brings in like a whole different perspective of what America is and what it means to be, a symbol of America as compared to other writers. Because now I could be wrong, but I think I know Christopher Priest did, a Captain America and the Falcon series in the early 2000s. But other than that, I'm pretty sure that the Cap's main title has always been written by white guys. Am I wrong?
As far as I know, yeah, mostly Captain America has been written by white guys, as were most comics at one time. People of color writing comic books is something that, unfortunately, at least when it comes to Marvel and DC, is still regarded as something newsworthy and something to be marveled at, if you forgive the pun. Whereas we should just be saying, such and such a writer is now writing so-and-so title. And we should just say, oh, wow, good. It's good. But then they got to, it's a black writer that's writing this title now. So what is he supposed to do? Is he supposed to be representative of all black people just because he's writing this title? which, gets into this whole, and I guess people always expect that whenever a black writer steps in and writes something like Captain America, they're going to bring a racial political angle.
Well, I think in the case, if you're talking someone like Christopher Priest, then yeah, you're right. It's not, you probably don't expect a whole lot of political angles going to be touched on in there. A little bit, but he's not. When he was writing Black Panther, he got into some pretty interesting political stuff. But when he was doing other stuff, he was just doing more straight up superheroes, like when he was doing Deadpool or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But when it comes to Ta-Nehisi Coates, because he's probably one of the smartest political commentators out there right now, putting him on Captain America and with his perspective on America and American history, it's created a really unique voice for that title. And I think it's just been a really eye-opening thing to read.
Well, that's why you put a writer like him on any title that you're going to do, because as you said, he's going to bring that unique perspective to anything he does, because that's what he does.
Right. But it's like, because I've read his, I think all of his I'm not sure if he's still writing Black Panther or not, but I've read at least some of his Black Panther stuff, and it's good, but it's not as good as Priest stuff, I don't think. But when you put him on, because I think part of it is because someone like Ta-Nehisi Coates, you'd expect him to write Black Panther, but him writing Captain America is a bit more unexpected, and he brings a whole different dimension to it that really makes it stand head and shoulders above his other work, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, you don't put him on a title like Captain America and expect him to do straight superhero stuff.
Right.
Because let's face it, he's not a straight superhero guy.
Yeah.
That's not where he's coming from. But he's bringing a unique new voice to this whole superhero stuff. And like you said, with his background, his knowledge of American history, American politics, his intellectualism, that's the stuff that you hire him for. Mm-hmm. You don't hire him to write, okay, bam, bam, flash, pow, zap, bing, boom. You don't hire him to write that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't put him on something like the Avengers, because that's just more big league superhero stuff. That's not going to fit him. No, you wouldn't put him on something like that. Matter of fact, you'd put him on something like a street level hero. Mm-hmm. Or something like Captain America, where he can explore the political ideas. Right, exactly. Or also X-Men. He can do something like X-Men really well, I think. Or let him do something like a S.H.I.E.L.D. book. Yeah, that's a good one too, especially in the current age and the age of war and terror and surveillance. Yeah, he'd be amazing on something like that. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking of. But, give him the concept and say to him, listen, how would you reinvent S.H.I.E.L.D. Mm-hmm. for our age now? For the world that we live in. What is the role of S.H.I.E.L.D.? What are they supposed to be doing? And why are they doing what they're doing? And if I recall, right now in the comics, S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually defunct. They're going through one of those periods where they don't exist. So it would be the perfect time to do a S.H.I.E.L.D. book with Ta-Nehisi Coates redesigning it. Well, yeah, because you know what? I'm kind of a traditionalist at heart as much as I fight it. And Marvel, to me, ain't Marvel without certain things, such as S.H.I.E.L.D. Well, these things go through cycles. Like, S.H.I.E.L.D. gets dismantled and, destroyed every 10 years or so. Oh, yeah. They always, like you said, they always dismantle it and stuff like that. But then, somebody brings it back. They say, okay, well... we got to have something before. We got to have S.H.I.E.L.D. in some kind of form or fashion. Yeah. And Nick Fury has died 50 times? Personally, I'd like to see S.H.I.E.L.D. brought back and be more something like, like a small unit, kind of like the Mission Impossible team. Okay. That'd be we see in the Tom Cruise movies. Something like that, Yeah, just like a small covert, type of, because I think we moved past, S.H.I.E.L.D. being this big multinational, uncle type of organization. I think that we've moved past that organization like that just wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. In a MCU
now, but a small covert team that goes in, does what they got to do, and then get out. I think that would be interesting to see.
So more like the season 2 era of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, like.
Yeah. Now, taking it back to this movie, Chris Evans, I was kind of surprised going in when they cast him as Captain America, because I'd known him more as the Human Torch, so I didn't, I knew him as like, this kind of like this cocky, egotistical guy playing that kind of role. And also he'd played something similar in The Losers or in Scott Pilgrim. So he had that kind of vibe, and I'm like, can he really pull off Captain America? And Captain America ended up being like his best role ever.
You know why I trusted him playing Captain America? Because in watching the Fantastic Four movies, I paid attention to him, and I'm hoping I get his last name right, Michael Chiklis.
Yeah.
Because watching the 2 Fantastic Four movies, something soon became apparent to me. That Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis were the only guys who read the original comics and knew who they were playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were the only ones that knew what the fuck they was doing in them 2. I'm sorry, folks, but yeah, they were the only 2 that knew what they were doing because they had their characters down pat.
Yeah,
that's why I didn't have a problem with Chris Evans. I said, okay, because you know what? He's going to go back and he's going to read the comics, and that's exactly what he's playing. He's playing the Steve Rogers Captain America that I know from the Jack Kirby era.
Yeah.
That's who he's playing. He's playing the Jack Kirby, Steve Rogers, Captain America.
And you know what? This was actually his 6th comic book film. So by the time, even before the MCU really kicked off, he'd already been in more comic book movies than most of his co-stars.
Yeah.
Because he did the 2 Fantastic Four movies. Then he did Push, which I guess is also based on a comic book. He was in The Losers. He was in Scott Pilgrim, and he did the voice of Casey Jones in the animated TMNT in 2007.
Okay. None of them which I've seen except for The Losers and the Fantastic Four movie. But he was good in all of them. And you know what? Again, we see the value of casting the right people, much like, as we said before, we go back to our man Christopher Reeve in the original Superman. Even after all this time, the movie's 40 years old, and when people think of Superman, who they think of? They don't think of Dean Cain or any of these other guys that play. They think of Christopher Reeve. They don't think of Henry Cavill. They think of Christopher Reeve. Much in the same way, it is. They are not going to be able to make another Captain America movie for about another 10 years. Then they're going to have to make one because, you know why? Because they got to give people time to forget Chris Evans.
Well, they can make another Captain America movie, but it would probably be with Sam as Captain America as opposed to.
Yeah.
But as far as Steve Rogers goes, yeah, you're right. It's going to be a while before they can do another one of those.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean. It's not like a case of where you have like 4 or 5 guys play Batman in the space of a decade or something like that.
Right.
It's not. You got to give people time to forget Chris Evans. That's how good he is.
Yeah.
He's also amazingly good.
And you made me think of something when you brought up Christopher Reeve's Superman, because when I think of the ideal Superman, like I think of the Christopher Reeves, like that the specific origin story he had in that movie. That is what I think of, with the Fortress of Solitude being all made of crystal. That's the image I have in my head of Superman. That's the definitive Superman, not the stuff. None of the comic book origin stories I think of as definitive as that one. And it's the same thing with Chris Evans in Captain America. Like he's just slightly different from all the different portrayals of Cap in the comic books. But when I think of the quintessential Captain America, I think of Chris Evans in these movies.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, again, I think this, first of all, folks, I think this movie is absolutely genius on so many levels. One of those levels is that we get so much time to get to know Steve Rogers before he gets injected with the super soldier serum and he gets the Vitarays.
I was watching the movie and I took note. Like, he doesn't actually become Captain America until about halfway into the movie.
Yeah, exactly. We spent a lot of time with him before he actually becomes Captain America.
Yeah.
It's like we're a whole hour. So you know what? We have time to get invested with this guy. Mm-hmm. We feel like we know him by the time that he's become Captain America, and we buy it simply because we've come along this journey with him as this 98-pound weakling. He meets the scientists, and the scientists, they have a relationship. They forge a bond. And then,
oh my God, I was not expecting to be as attached to Abraham Erskine as I was in this movie.
Again, this movie, a large part of it works because of the relationships that is built up, and they get a tangible relationship in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, Stanley Tucci sells this so hard in this movie, and he does it. He's incredible in this. Like, he's endearing, he's caring, but he's also funny. Like, there's that one of my favorite scenes is when before the operation, and he comes and he brings Steve the schnapps, and he's like, "Oh wait, no, you can't drink. You have an operation. You have procedure tomorrow." And then he's like, "Okay." And then Steve says, "So I guess we'll drink it later." He's like, "No, why am I going to drink it later? I'll drink it now. I don't have a procedure tomorrow."
Yeah, and you know what? He does it so quietly. He doesn't go for the big bombastic moments in this, but he makes the character memorable through little small things just like that.
You know what's something else I realized as I was watching it is when Steve asks him, "Where are you from?" and he says Queens, but before that, Germany. And then in Civil War, when he fights Spider-Man, and then he asks him, "You got heart, kid, where are you from?" and he says Queens, and then Cap gets this kind of little smile on his face, and he remembers. I never caught that until just now.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought I just thought that smirk was about, like, New York borough rivalry, but really it's because, he's remembering Erskine.
He's remembering Erskine, yeah, and he's saying, "Wow, people from Queens, and he's like saying, okay, well, I trusted that guy. He's from Queens. I can trust this guy."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. It's a nice little moment. It's a nice little moment and I always treasure those little moments that you see in movies such as this, because a lot of that is what goes into building characterization. And even though you may not get it the first time, like you said, it takes a couple times. Like today, I did not notice. I watched the movie today, and there was like a whole lot of little things like that, like you said, that I hadn't seen before. But I was looking at the movie with a critical eye today, whereas before I was watching it just as entertainment. Right. But now when I was watching it today, and I was watching it with a little bit more critical eye, and I was being a little bit more objective, and I said, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, and this is kind of cool. Whereas one of the things that I always get into an argument with about people is that they complain about Hydra being a stand-in for the Nazis. Mm-hmm. We never see any actual Nazis in the movie until the scene where the Red Skull is like showing him the weapon that he's built.
Right.
And then he's declaring that Hydra is going to break off from the Nazi party and it's going to become its own thing and stuff like that. But we never see any swastikas or anything like that. Mm. And people always say, "Oh, yeah, well, that's unrealistic." Oh, so you mean you've got a movie now with a guy that got a shield that he can throw all over the room and it hits 9 or 10 people and comes back to his hand. Mm-hmm. That's okay, but you freak out because there's no Nazis in the movie. I think that was a smart move. Yeah, I think that was a smart move myself. Yeah, okay, we hear the name of Hitler. We hear the Nazi party being mentioned, but it is clearly established. They said, well, Hydra is like its own cult within the Nazi party.
Part of that could also have been done for international distribution because, in Germany, the swastika is banned.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's another reason why. I think that was a good move myself, because this movie per se, it's not like, say, that okay, it's not like what can I compare it to? It's not like Indiana Jones, where where it is necessary that the actual Nazi Party and Hitler be an integral part of the adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that necessary for Captain America. It's enough that we get Hydra and we know that that's the scientific division of the Nazi Party, and that's what Captain America is fighting. Basically, that's all we need.
Right. And so going into some of the other performances here, like, we talked a little bit about Sebastian Stan. And this is something that, because when Brubaker came on Captain America, he looked at the relationship between Cap and Bucky, and he did the math in his head, because he figures, all right, well, Cap was a young guy when he went into World War II. He was like, what, maybe 19, 20 years old tops? So, and Bucky... Sorry, go ahead.
I believe, as a matter of fact, I do believe that in the movie, he does say he's only 19 to 20 years old.
Yeah. So he did the math, because Bucky was, it was pretty obviously stated that Bucky was like 16 when he started working with Cap's partner, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, like the way Brubaker looked at it was the whole father-son dynamic didn't really make sense because they were only about a few years apart in age. So instead, he took it more of like a sibling relationship, and that's kind of how he portrayed them in his run. And then that carries over into this movie, and it gives so much more to their relationship as opposed to having them be like a second-rate Batman and Robin.
And actually, you know why it works even better? It works even better because when we first meet Steve Rogers and Bucky, it's like Bucky is the big brother.
Right.
Because, of course, Steve hasn't taken the super soldier serum, and he's like the scrawny 98-pound weakling, and he's getting his ass kicked in the alley, which in a nice little bit, when the bully is beating him up, he picks up a trash can lid and he holds it like a shield to defend himself. Which again is a nice little moment.
And then we also get that moment when he says, you don't know when to stay down, do you? And he says, I can do this all day. And that's something that the series keeps coming back to so many times throughout.
Right, yeah, like every time he gets into a fight, and he's getting his ass kicked, he says, yeah, I could do this all day long. And
then he makes fun of himself in Endgame when he says, I can do this all day long. He's like, yeah, I know.
yeah, when he's fighting, he said, yeah, okay, I know that line. But Bucky is like his big brother in that part of their relationship. But then later on in the movie, after he's become all big and buff and he's rescuing the soldiers and everything like that, then Steve Rogers, it's like he becomes the big brother now.
Yeah, and I love their interactions when it first happened, when Bucky's like, he's all disoriented from the experiments, and he says, were you always this tall?
Yeah, he said, wait a minute. He said, wait a minute, weren't you smaller?
Yeah, and he's like, and he says, like, what happened to you? And he's like, oh, well, I joined the army.
I joined the army.
And he's like, is this permanent? He's like, well, so far it is.
Yeah, he's like, well, so far. He's like, I don't know if it's going to take, but yeah, it's working for me so far. Yeah, and also, like Bucky can't get over it. He said, well, what happened to you, man?
But also, the film avoids, which is something I worried when I first saw it. Like, I thought it was going to go into the standard, the obvious route would have been Bucky becomes jealous of Steve now that Steve is a super soldier. And they give you kind of a little tease like they're going to go down that route when after they get rescued and they're in the bar and Peggy comes in wearing that dress, which I looked up in the trivia, that dress was actually originally made for Melanie Laurent in Inglourious Bastards.
Really?
Yeah, and they never actually ended up using it in that movie, so they had Haley Atwell wear it in that scene instead. But that scene, where he's trying to hit on Peggy and Peggy's just ignoring him and she's only looking at Steve. And then afterwards, Bucky goes, it's like, I'm you. He's like, this is a nightmare. And they could have so easily gone down the very cliche but very easy route of doing a Cap and Bucky jealousy thing, and they didn't. They had the sense to avoid doing that. It works so much better that they didn't do that.
Yeah, because after a while, you get the impression, at least I did, I got the impression that Bucky was actually happy for him.
Yeah.
You know, because this is his best friend, and he has finally gotten what he always wanted to be.
More than that, he's getting the recognition that Bucky's always felt he deserved.
Yeah, exactly. You know, yeah. And like you said, it would have been, okay, if you had a movie with lesser talents, doing this, that's the route they would have went. He would have gotten jealous of him, and that whole thing with him falling in the ice, he would have blamed Captain America for they would, but no, they don't go that route at all. They say, you know what, this movie doesn't have time for that BS.
And Bucky proves that it's not Cap that he's going after, but it's not Cap. It's not the reason. It's not following Captain America. He's not taken with the whole pomp and circumstance and the mythology of Captain America, right? That scene when he says, "Do you want to? Are you ready to follow Captain America into the jaws of death?" And he goes like, "No, hell no. I'm not following Captain America. I'm following the little scrawny kid who is too dumb to walk away from a fight."
Exactly. That's it. It goes back to the whole, hey, listen, I knew you win.
Yeah.
You know, okay, these people think you're Captain America, but I remember, I know who you really are, which is the core of their relationship, is that, they knew each other when.
Yeah, yeah.
They knew each other before all of this happened, and that's what they never forget. And
all throughout these movies, like in Civil War, when he says, he's like, your name is Steve. You used to wear newspapers in your shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. Bucky doesn't let him forget it by him saying that. I mean, when he says that, no, I'm not following Captain America. I'm following the scrawny little kid. Didn't know what he's reminding him also of who he was.
It's reinforcing what Erskine told him before the operation. He's like, no matter what happens, always, remember who you are. He's like, not a good soldier, but a good man.
Exactly. Don't get a swelled head now. Let this Captain America shit go to your head. You're still the scrawny kid which is at the strength of Captain America in the MCU, in that that's who he really is. He doesn't really think of himself as, like this big inspiring figure that everybody looks up to. This is who he is at his core. He's the scrawny little kid from Brooklyn who never gave up, who doesn't like bullies.
Well, a line that you've always pointed to in discussions you've had, I've seen you have this movie many times, is the line when he says, when Red Skull asks him, what's so special about you? And Steve just says, nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's how he sees himself. He leaves the Captain America stuff for other people. And I think that Steve Rogers has enough self-awareness to not identify who he really is with the symbol of what Captain America is. He realizes that that's a symbol. And he protects that symbol. And that's what he sees his role as being, somebody who protects that symbol.
Which is also why
he doesn't confuse himself.
Which is also why he doesn't get possessive over it when, at the end of Civil War, when Tony tells him, you don't deserve that shield. My father made that. And, Steve just says, you're right. I don't need that. He's like, you know what? I don't need the shield at all. So he just drops it. He's like, this isn't who I have to be.
Right, exactly. It's not like Tony Stark, whose identity is bound up with his technology. Because if he doesn't have the technology, and even Captain America says that, take away that tin suit and what are you?
Yeah.
He tells him that at one point, and he's absolutely right. If you take it away from, if you take Tony Stark's, if you take all that technology away from him, then who is he? He doesn't know, because that's how he defines himself. And that's how he defines his place in the world, is through his technology. Whereas Captain America isn't like that. He's defined himself by who he is as a man. And yeah, here, you can have the shield, you can have the costume. I don't need that.
Which is also why he doesn't have like the kind of identity crisis that, Tony has when he loses the suit in Iron Man 3, or that Thor has when he loses Mjolnir in Ragnarok, right? He loses the shield. He's still the same guy when he comes back in Infinity War.
Yeah. He's still the same. Right, exactly. Now Thor, he loses the hammer. He's, oh shit. You know, he's like, but as Odin tells him, he said, wait a minute, are you the god of thunder or the god of hammer?
Right.
I cracked up so much. I love that line. He said, wait, you're not the god of hammer, you're the god of thunder. That's the hammer is not you.
Right. And that's something Steve understands. He knows that the shield is not him. It's a symbol, but it's a symbol that he protects, which is why when Tony gives it to him in Endgame, he's like, I'm not so sure about this. Because he sees that as a symbol of unity with the Avengers and like a leader of the country. And after everything that's happened, he's not sure if he's still the person to do that.
Well, you know what? The shield is just like Thor's hammer. You know, he doesn't think he's worthy at that point to have the shield.
Right.
In other words, you got to be worthy to carry the shield, just like you got to be worthy to pick up the hammer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, speaking of, just a minor digression, but remember in Endgame, when he gives him the shield and he says, look, I got to give it to you or else Morgan's going to take it sledding.
Yeah.
There was a photo released of the actress who played Morgan on a Captain America shield sledding.
See, that should be they should have had that in the movie. They should have had that.
Yeah. All right.
But you see how deep these movies can get folks with the, you know, with the symbols. And you thought it was just a shield. No, It's not just a shield. It's Excalibur.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about, you know, some of the performances. We talked about Haley Atwell, Chris Evans, Sebastian Stan, Stanley Tucci. What about Hugo Weaving, who plays the Red Skull?
Well, Hugo Weaving is brilliant, period. I mean, you know, whatever he does. And he strikes the right note with this character in that, you know what? Who's the guy that played Artem Zola? Toby
Jones.
Yeah, Toby Jones. I love the relationship. Again, I go back to relationships in this movie. I love the relationship that they have.
Yeah.
It you know, it's not your typical, okay, chief bad guy and chief lackey, you know, type of relationship. Is that it's almost like a marriage.
Yeah, very much.
It's almost like a marriage, you know. And like that's how he treats Toby Jones. He treats him almost like insignificant wife that, you know, he has to slap around every once in a while, you know, to make himself feel good. And Toby Jones is like very nervous around him and everything. And Hugo Weaving, I like the fact that here's a guy that's not afraid to, you know, go through a movie. Well, he did it in V for Vendetta where, you know, he wore a mask for the whole movie. He doesn't mind doing that, you know, putting on a mask and, you know, because you know what? He knows how to act through the mask.
Exactly. And he does a great job too. And with a character like the Red Skull, he's such a tough character to portray or to write because, you know, the Red Skull as originally created is basically, you know, almost cartoonishly evil. Yeah, right. Yeah. And somehow Hugo Weaving is able to make him work. But whenever you have this, and you know, we wrote the guy when we were writing together fanfic together. You know, he's such a hard character to write because that he's a cartoon. Yeah. The Red Skull is one of those guys that, you got to get a handle on him. In that he's not like, okay, like say Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is bombastic. But that's because he's supposed to be bombastic, and he's bombastic in a way that you could, also because, okay, Dr. Doom has got a lot of other things that's going for him. He's got that inherent nobility thing going for him, that if he went one way, he could have been a hero. You know, he's got that tragedy that works for him. The Red Skull is just an asshole. Let's face it. I just read one of the Epic collections, the Avengers Epic collections, and in it had the Emperor Doom graphic novel when he uses the Purple Man to take control of the whole world. And what does he do? He doesn't subjugate everybody, but he eliminates crime, he eliminates poverty, he eliminates hunger. Doom is actually, you know, he does have he can be altruistic, but his only thing is like but his ego demands complete loyalty in order to do that.
Well, his thing is that, listen, the world would be way better if everybody would just obey me and worship me and do what I tell them to do. That's his whole. And there's something the world, because I believe in Emperor Doom. Was it Emperor Doom or was it in the Avengers, where he actually does take over the world, but nobody knows it?
I don't know about. I think that might have been in the Avengers, because Emperor Doom, everybody knew he was in charge.
Okay, yeah.
Emperor Doom was the one where Wonder Man comes out of stasis and is the only one who hasn't been affected by it.
Oh, okay, because there was one where he actually did take over the world, but nobody knew it, and so he had to release the Avengers to fight him because he couldn't live with nobody not knowing that he had taken over the world.
There was some aspect of that. I think maybe your memories are mixing two things, because there was an aspect.
It probably is.
Yeah, because there was an aspect in Emperor Doom where he finds out that Simon Williams has convinced some of the Avengers to break free of the conditioning, and he lets it happen because he's bored with just ruling and he wants to conquer.
Okay, well then that was Emperor. Okay, then that is Emperor Doom that I'm thinking of. Yeah, because he gets bored because there's nobody left to fight because everybody is under his mind control, but nobody knows that. Yeah, that's probably. But yeah, but you've got that aspect with him. You've got the thing where once a year he goes down to hell to fight for the soul of his mother. You know, he's got all of these other aspects that make him an infinitely more interesting character than the Red Skull, who is just basically, listen, I just want to take over the world. That's all. That's it. I'm a Nazi.
Also, he has respect for Susan Richards, right? And he said that no harm will ever come to Susan Richards' children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's got a tremendous amount of respect for her, whereas, Reed, he could push him down a flight of stairs in a wheelchair in a minute and don't lose any sleep over it. But you always get the impression that if Doom hears that Sue is in trouble, he's going to come halfway around the world and heaven help whoever's messing with her. But you go Weave, because one part of this movie I just got to tell you about, because when I said I got to mention this to Perry, because you saw The Mandalorian, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what cracked me up? Remember the scene where, it's when Captain America, he releases all of the prisoners, and Hugo Weaving, he's up in the control booth, and he sees something, he said, well, what the hell is that? He looks at Captain America over there. So then Zola comes over there and said, oh man, what's going on? He said, we got a problem, everything like that. So the Red Skull goes, yep, right. He starts flipping the switches and he says, what are you doing? He said, I'm activating the self-destruct. And I thought of IG-88, that was his go-to mode. Whenever shit got to it, I got self-destruct. and Arnim Zola goes, well, wait a minute, aren't you going to get the troop? Well, we're outnumbered. Click, click, click. Wait a minute. I mean, the guy, that's his default mode. He doesn't even fight for the base. He just blows it up.
Well, it's like you said, the Red Skull's an asshole. That's all he really is.
Oh, man. And I mean, this cat was ready because he had about like a dozen red buttons. That he was just
he did not skip on the explosives.
No, he was ready, man. He said, okay, if I got to blow this sucker up, it's going up. And it's like he's almost cheerful about it. And Arnim Zola is going, wait a minute. Get the troops and no, we're outnumbered. Click, 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 click. And that's what I thought of. I thought of the Mandalorian, the IG-88, that anytime shit got to, I got to self-destruct. And the Mandalorian said, wait a minute. Just give me a minute, okay? He said, okay. But I'm ready. I can self-destruct anytime you want. Oh, that had me cracking up today. I was laughing so hard I had to pause the movie.
And then the other performance that I really liked in this movie, which is, it's kind of small when you take it in line with everything else, is Tommy Lee Jones as Colonel Phillips. Now,
I'm glad you mentioned that. If I have any problem with Captain America, is not with Tommy Lee Jones as the actor, because you know what? in a movie like this, anytime you have an actor like Tommy Lee Jones, it gives the movie solidity. Mm-hmm. It gives it a certain gravitas. It gives it a certain, how can I say this? Okay, subconsciously, when you see somebody like Tommy Lee Jones in a movie like this taking it seriously, you take it seriously.
Right.
Which is why he's there. Mm-hmm. But
unfortunately, that didn't work so well in Batman Forever.
No, yeah, well. Moving right along. Every time I hear him referred to as Colonel Phillips, mm-hmm. in my mind, I always hear Colonel Sawyer, because to me, that's who he should have been playing, Colonel Happy Sam Sawyer from Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos.
Oh, okay. So, see, this is interesting because I don't think I've read really anything with Phillips in the comics, so I don't have that perspective going into it.
Right, which is why I'm saying, well wait a minute. Somebody should have said, well, you know what? There's this character that is tied to the Howling Commandos and Captain America called Happy Sam Sawyer. He was the commanding officer of the Howling Commandos. And, it just surprised me that somebody just didn't say, well, let's just make this character Captain, Colonel Sawyer. Because to me, that's who Tommy Lee Jones is playing. Okay. Because if you go back to the original Sergeant Fury, the comic books that was done in World War II, this character that Tommy Lee Jones is playing, that's exactly who it is from the comic book. So I'm wondering, did Tommy Lee Jones read the comic book and say, okay, well, this is the guy I'm going to play, or if he just fell back on his default gruff character that he's played in so many other movies, but actually.
Or it could have been that maybe the screenwriters, because obviously they, these, Marcus and McFeely, they're guys who did their homework. They've written all the Captain America movies. They threw in tons of references to the comics. So I wonder if they just combined Sawyer and Phillips.
Okay, well, listen, I don't know, because I've never heard of Phillips. Like I said, whenever I hear him referred to as Colonel Phillips, I just hear it as Colonel Sawyer. That's just me.
Okay, so but you know more about the Cap comic books. How does he compare to Phillips in the comics?
Who?
Oh, Tommy Lee Jones' portrayal, because Phillips is a character in the comics as well.
Oh, but I don't know that character.
Oh, okay, I see.
I just know Sawyer.
Okay.
Colonel Sawyer. That's the character that I know, and that's the one that I see Tommy Lee Jones. I have no idea who, Colonel Phillips is. I assume that he's part of, that he's from some run of the comic book that I don't know about.
Yeah, he was just like in this movie, he was, the soldier in charge of the commander or whatever in charge of Operation Rebirth.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool. All right. I can see that. Well, if he's from the comics, okay, I got to go with it, mm-hmm. But like I said, I'm a traditionalist. Since they had Dum Dum Dugan in the movie, I would have liked to see Happy Sam Sawyer as well.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I wonder
who was known as Happy Sam because he was never happy. That was the whole thing. He was always pissed off. He never smiled. He never laughed. He was always yelling at Sergeant Fury, calling him a knucklehead and threatening him to bust him down to private and everything like that. And that was Sergeant Fury's nickname for him, Happy Sam, because because the guy was never happy.
Oh, okay. So I wonder if maybe it was just that, because they could have both been very similar in the comics then, just because that's like the standard image of a commanding officer.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones has played that type of character in other movies. So that's like his default, gruff character. So, but again, like I said, he works for me in this movie no matter what he's playing, because as I said earlier, whenever you see an actor like Tommy Lee Jones in a movie like this, it's just, at least for me, there's a switch that flicks in my head, because it's okay, well, he's taking this shit seriously, so I could take it seriously too.
He's also got some really funny moments like that, just like really dry, funny moments, like when he's introducing himself to the men, and he says, like, we're gonna win this war because we have the best men, and then he pauses and notices Steve, who's just looking stoic as hell.
Yeah, and then Steve comes to him when he's heard that Bucky has been captured and everything like that. And he says, "Oh, here comes the Star Spangled Man with a plan."
Yeah.
He said, "What's your plan, Star Spangled?"
Or when he says to Peggy, he's like, "You and I are gonna have a conversation later that you won't enjoy."
That you will not enjoy. Yeah.
And then when he starts spelling his name, he's like, "Well, I can spell. I'm fine."
And he says, he said, "There's one point he says, listen, if you have anything to say to me, keep it to yourself."
I do love too when he's talking to Erskine and he says, "You stick a needle in his arm, it's gonna go right through it." And he says, "Look at him, he's making me cry."
Yeah, you know what? And I kind of suspect that half of what he says in this movie was ad-libs he just throws off. I can't believe that it was scripted. For some reason, I just get the feeling that a lot of what he said, a lot of those little lines he throws off were ad-libs.
Yeah, and he throws them off so naturally. He does a really good job in there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, if they were scripted, then it's just a testament to his talent as an actor, his prodigious talent as an actor, that the way he says them makes him sound like he just made it up right on the spot.
Although, speaking of ad-lib, do you know what moment in the movie was totally ad-libbed? And it's not involving Phillips.
What's that?
So when after Steve gets the super soldier serum, when the chamber opens up and Peggy comes up to him and she kind of like reaches up as she's about to touch his chest, and then she pulls her hand away.
Yeah, that
was not scripted. Haley Atwell actually had that reaction.
Listen, I can't blame him because the guy did some serious working out for this movie.
Yeah, man, a lot of steamed chicken there.
Whoa, he is. When you talk about impressive musculature, yeah. I mean, listen, that is no CGI. I mean, when he's Steve Rogers, yeah, that's all CGI because they had to put his head on the smaller guy's, body. But I mean, after he comes out of the thing, after he's done, that's impressive.
yeah, that's not like. Because in the first Spider-Man movie, when Peter looks at himself in the mirror after he's been bitten, he sees that he's all buff now. That was Tobey Maguire's head slapped on a body double. That is Chris Evans stepping out of that chamber.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's him. Yeah, like I said, this cat did some serious working out for the movie, which I can appreciate, and it shows. But I mean, with all of the stunt work, because I don't know, to me it looks like he did a lot of his own stunt work, in this movie. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not an expert. Maybe, they did have an adequate body done. But I figured that the reason he got that buff was so that he could do a lot of his own, do a lot of his own stunts.
Also, Evans turned down this role 3 times.
Really?
Yeah, because he was worried about being in such a high-profile movie and what it would do for his private life. And it was Downey who convinced him to take the part. Downey told him, "Look, if you take this part, you'll have the freedom to do any project you want for the rest of your life."
Oh, absolutely.
And so then Evans, he thought about that, and then he went to meet with Joe Johnston and the producers again, and at that point they had finally convinced him to take the role.
Which kind of dovetails into a conversation I was having with some people on Facebook a couple of days ago. I'm sure you heard about the statements that the filmmaker Terry Gilliam, who did Brazil and Time Bandits, that he made about the Black Panther. Yeah,
I heard about that.
The disparaging remarks that he made about that. Now, I love the guy. I love the guy. I love Brazil, one of the most brilliant movies ever made. Time Bandits, one of my favorite movies about time travel.
12 Monkeys.
Baron Munchausen. Yeah, 12 Monkeys.
And he was also in the Monty Python movies.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he's the only American member of Monty Python. And I used to wonder why he never spoke in interviews, stuff like that. But you know what? If this is the type of stuff that he was going to come out with back then, maybe that's why everybody else said, listen, you just stay in the background and don't talk. But just let me say this real quick. Brilliant as he is as a filmmaker, there's one thing that Terry Gilliam never understood. Terry Gilliam never understood that in order to keep making movies, your movies have to keep making money.
Yeah.
And he's never made a movie. Yeah, they've been. I think maybe the one movie of his that made a lot of money was The Fisher King and 12 Monkeys. Those two were like, you know, but he never really made. Okay, how can I put it? He doesn't have a track record for making commercially successful movies, which is why I guess he spent the last 20 years wasting his time making a Don Quixote movie that apparently nobody wanted to see except for him.
Yeah.
I say that to say this. Robert Downey Jr. gave him great advice because that's what a lot of filmmakers understand. They understand, okay, if I want to make this personal movie, for me, I got to do something that everybody wants to see. So they'll go and make a commercial movie. And that's what Robert Downey Jr. was telling him. Listen, you do this, you're set for life, bro. You can do whatever you want to do, which is what you do. You go ahead and you make a commercial project. And I get so tired of hearing people talk about, well, they sold out. They just did it for money. Well, yes, that's why most of us do what we do. We do it for money.
Well, do you remember Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, the conversation between Ben Affleck and Matt Damon about the different projects they're doing? And Affleck tells Matt Damon, he's like, how many times did I tell you? You do the safe picture, then you do the art picture.
Bingo. That's what you do. And yeah, so, and I know that Chris Evans, I've heard like a lot of things about these various projects that he wants to do. And he has said that, well, he couldn't have done it without the safety net financially that, you know, the MCU movies have afforded him.
Right.
And he's also built up a lot of goodwill in the industry, you know, by doing these movies. So, you know, he can walk into any studio and say, well, listen, I want to do this.
Well, you know what also is amazing about him is just like Christopher Reeve, like he is Captain America, or just like Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, like he is Captain America in his personal life too. Like you read about the stuff he says on social media, like when he speaks out against injustice and that kind of stuff. Like this is the kind of stuff you would hear coming out of Steve Rogers' mouth.
Well, I think that you know what? I don't think that. Okay, my thing is that you have to be a really good actor to play a role like that. If you're totally unlike that character, like some actors can't do that.
Yeah.
They can play like these really morally upstanding characters, but in their real life, they're like real sleazebags. But then you have other people that they play these roles. And I do believe that to a certain extent, they start to internalize the qualities of the characters that they are playing. And I think that you know, that's the case here with, like you said, with Christopher Reeve and, you know, with Chris Evans and, you know, some other characters that have played these superhero characters, because you see that now they do a lot of socially conscious things. You know, they're always doing stuff for charity and everything. So it's like they've internalized some of the qualities of these characters that they are playing, which, hey, is a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, one other thing I wanted to just very briefly touch on is, you know, when he comes in to meet with Howard and Phillips about his gear after he's rescued everyone and after he talks to Peggy in the bar, there's that secretary or whatever, the woman who's sitting there, and she comes on to him. Do you remember the part I'm talking about?
I remember.
So, do you know who played that character?
That's supposed to be the mother of Star-Lord, I believe.
Yeah, that's the same actress, Laura Haddock. So probably not Star-Lord's mother, but you know, might have been grandmother. Yeah, Star-Lord's grandmother was sitting on Captain America.
Yeah. No, I remember somebody else had mentioned that, and they had actually, somebody else had actually mentioned that to me, that they said, yeah, well, you know, that's the same character. And I said, really? So yeah, so. And you know what? I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it is a nice little thing to think about.
Right. It probably wasn't intentional. It's just, you know, they had her in the movie, so they decided to bring her back for Guardians of the Galaxy. Just like, but sometimes, there are these little happy accidents that happen, like in Iron Man 2, the little kid who's wearing the Iron Man helmet, and he's standing up against the robots, and then Iron Man comes in and saves him and says, "Thanks, kid." Like later, when they got Spider-Man in the universe, Kevin Feige said, "Oh yeah, that little kid, that's now Peter Parker."
Right, yeah. Okay. I remember hearing that, that's supposed to be Peter Parker, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now at the time they wouldn't have intended that, because if they had the opportunity to use Peter Parker, they would have done it a lot sooner than they did.
Right. But like you said, it's like these little happy coincidences. And like you said, that actress, okay, that scene I think is only like barely like a minute.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But it's not enough to affect the overall thing. But if that's what you want to believe, that's Star-Lord's, grandmother, which is who I think it is, I like to believe it is.
Yeah.
Like I said, Star-Lord's grandmother was hitting on Captain America. It's a nice, call me sleazy, folks, but it's a nice thought.
All right. So anything else to wrap up with on First Avenger?
Only that when it comes to sheer entertainment, this is I have no problem with any of the MCU movies, as everybody well knows. I own them all on Blu-ray. I binge watch them occasionally. Matter of fact, I believe that after we get through with this later on tonight, I'm probably going to go watch Thor or the Avengers, or, maybe even probably I'll watch the Winter Soldier. Since I watched Captain America, I'm probably going to finish watching other Captain America movies, But this is absolutely one of the best of the MCU movies. And if anybody, just like with all the other movies, if anybody had ever told me I would see a Captain America movie done this well, and I think it's done this well because you put your finger right on it. They made a World War II pulp action adventure movie first and a superhero movie second.
Yeah.
That was their sensibility. That's what they started with. They said, no, this isn't a superhero movie. This is a World War II action adventure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then they put on the superhero, stuff afterwards, and it works. It works superbly. It's one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies, period.
Now, see, it's not one of my favorites, just because that's not a commentary on the movie itself, just like more how many good things Marvel has come out with since. Like, as far as the Cap movies go, this is my least favorite of the three. But that's not to disparage this movie at all. This movie is still amazing. It's just that Winter Soldier and Civil War were so much is superior, so better. But it's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? Yeah. It's like what I tell people when people always, come at me talking about, oh, Godfather 3 is such a horrible movie. I said, well, no, it's not. I said, the only problem Godfather 3 had is that it had to follow Godfather 1 and 2, which was very hard double act to follow, for any movie to follow.
Yeah.
If we just had Godfather 3, everybody would be talking about how amazing it is. But no, we can't do that because we had 1 and 2. Yeah, if you want to take all three of the Captain America movies, and if I'm being objective about it, yeah, Winter Soldier is, forget about it. That's like, the main one. And Civil War is crafted so amazingly, and it works as not only Captain America movie, but an Avengers movie as well. It's like two movies in one.
Yeah.
You get two movies in one. This is an amazing movie, yeah, but out of the three, yeah, it's not as good as those two, but yeah, it's still an amazing piece of work.
That being said, it still holds its own against those two. It's not like inferior. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's this. In fact, I think this is probably the first superhero trilogy that was good from beginning to end.
Yeah, and
because you look at all the other ones. Because you look at all the other ones. You look at Superman. You had Superman 2, and then you had Superman 3. You look at you had Batman Returns, and then came Batman Forever. X-Men, X-Men X2, and then The Last Stand. They shit the bed. Same thing with Spider-Man, and Iron Man even. Who thought that would have happened with Iron Man? But it did. And then they came out with Captain America. And at the time, if you had said to me that the Iron Man trilogy is going to peter out in the third one, while the Captain America trilogy is going to keep improving with each entry, I would have told you you're insane. Because there's no way that based on those first movies, that the Captain America series would end up being superior to the Iron Man series.
And you're absolutely right in that this is like the only superhero trilogy that I could think of, where every movie is strong.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't point at any one of the Captain America movies and say, like you can with like Iron Man 3. Mm-hmm. Or like Spider-Man 3, you always say, well, there's one movie that kind of let you down. Captain America movies, none of them do that.
Right. And the Avengers series, now that's all been consistently enjoyable, but Cap did it first.
Yeah.
This is the first superhero series from beginning to end that was satisfying.
Mm-hmm. And just like you said, every movie got better.
Yeah.
Every one of Captain America movies got better.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think that's basically all we have to say about First Avenger. I mean, it's, going back and watching it again, I sometimes, because this movie kind of gets lost in the shuffle because of everything else that the MCU has been doing. And, some of these are, with the exception of Iron Man, everything that came out between Iron Man and Avengers kind of gets, lost in the shuffle. People don't really have as high opinion of it looking back. But you go back and you're watching them individually, they're actually really well done.
Well, that's why we're doing this, because my hope is that when they listen to episodes such as this, they'll say, hey, you know what? It has been a couple of years since I've seen Captain America, the First Avenger. Let me go back and watch it again, because it deserves to be, excuse me, movies like this deserve to be, like, I don't know about anybody else, but there are like certain film series that I do like a marathon like every year, just watching the MCU movies, Star Trek movies, and Indiana Jones. I like, rewatch. I have my own personal marathons of those movies every year. And because every time I watch them, I see something new, and I'm reminded of how good these movies were. Because like you said, after a while, it tends to get lost in the shuffle because you got new movies coming out all the time, and, you forget how good those older movies were.
I mean, especially now, because it's insane to think that it took, 5 years to get from Iron Man to Avengers and have like 5 movies come out in that span of time, and then now you extend it out, and the series has been going on for 10 years, and they've had over 20 movies.
Yeah. So it's, so it is worth, every once in a while going back and looking at these movies and reminding yourself of where the MCU started at and what it built on, and how these movies have got the reputation. Because let's face it, the MCU period is 22 movies in the whole Infinity Saga. Mm-hmm. That is a feat that will probably never be duplicated in our lifetime. Well, it's not, at least not in mine. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's an extraordinary achievement. It's 22 movies that told one whole comprehensive story.
Yeah. So and it all comes back to these original movies because they were so strong, because they did provide that foundation to build up on.
Exactly.
Which is why the MCU has been successful while the DCEU has fumbled, because the DCEU didn't have that strong foundation. The MCU did.
Well, yeah. Well, you know what? Their problem was they tried to play catch up.
Right.
Instead of going off and doing their own thing, they tried to play catch up. And I think that what they have finally done is that they've abdicated the movies to Marvel. They say, they can have it. And they're basically like concentrating on their TV universe now.
Right, which is smart because the TV shows did it the smart way. They built the foundation first, and then they were able to expand so much based on that. Yeah,
which is why we got Crisis, and which is why Crisis is so good, because they had, they had all these different TV series that built up, the Crisis.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So speaking of, now our next episode, I know we talked about doing Crisis, but this next episode that we record would probably come out at the beginning of February. So what do you want to do? Do you want to do Crisis, or do you want to jump straight into Black History Month movies? Because we can always extend Black History Month into March. No one's going to... It's our show. We make the rules.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, we can always extend it and take another month and everything there because Crisis is going to end this week, so we should do that while it's still fresh in our minds.
Yeah,
and and we can do that, and then we'll jump into Black History Month with the Black superhero movies after that.
Okay, all right. So that actually works out perfectly because this is my pick this week. So next week we'll be going back and watching. Well, I don't know about you, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the episodes and I'm just going to marathon them as one big movie. Probably this weekend.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do too.
So really get like the full effect of how it's intended to be. All right, so next episode we'll be talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. Happy New Year. Thanks so much for following us and helping us get to 10 episodes. If you want to help support us at all, we got a Patreon page. Just go over to superherocinephiles.com, or you can look for us on Patreon. You'll find us that way. And join the Facebook page, too. Join the group. We've got a bunch of discussions going on there. People posting reviews of superhero movies, all sorts of good stuff.
Okay.
Derrick, do you have anything you wanted to add or plug right now, or are you good for now?
I had 2 books come out in the month of December, Dylan the Odd Jobs and the Dylan Annual Collection for 2019, which was published literally on the last day of the year. But that's how these things work out. There were some technical things that were going on, but it is out now, and you can buy it, and you can relive all the Christmas goodness because they're all Dylan Christmas stories in that book, which is why it came out in December. But it was supposed to come out earlier, it didn't. But hey, there's stories you can enjoy any time of the year. So by all means, go to Amazon and pick that up, as well as any of the other books that I've written. Just go to Amazon, put in Derrick Ferguson, and you'll see everything I got up there. Also, enjoy.
I've got nothing yet, but probably the next episode I'll have something to announce. So we'll keep you waiting for that.
Cool.
All right, that does it for us. Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Happy New Year. Thank you for listening, and God bless. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, or if you have a superhero movie or TV show you'd like us to cover in a future episode, you can email us at superherocinephiles@gmail.com, or you can also visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com. If you like what you hear, leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Each review helps us reach more potential listeners. You can also support the show by renting or purchasing the movies discussed, or by picking up our books, all of which can be accessed through the website, as well as find links to our social media presences. The theme music for this show is a shortened version of Superhero Showdown, a royalty-free piece of music courtesy of FezLeonStudios.com.